Kenyan youths have really been protesting for more than 5 days. It's been a hotbed in the streets of Kenya because of the finance bill. And we're looking at what is really happening in Kenya. Ladies and gentlemen, you're very much welcome to this episode of the Business Hour. My name is Frank Fagba. What is really happening in Kenya? From 16% increase in their taxes for bread and also 25% increase in their taxes for cooking oil. I think these are the conversations we need to have on today's episode of the Business Hour. And we're also going to draw a comparison between the Kenyan macroeconomics and the Nigerian macroeconomics index. Let's see, is Nigeria the next place where we're going to be having protests because of issues hovering around the national economy? I think these are the conversations we should be having. And right now, we have no other person but we have Mr. Bolahan Olajede. Mr. Bolahan Olajede, you're very much welcome to the Business Hour.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
There have been a lot of issues happening in Africa, and Kenya is right now on the spotlight, talking about their finance bill. 16% tax on the price of bread, and also 25% tax on the price of cooking oil. And it looks like Kenyans are not Kenyans are not finding that funny at all. They're really revolting against the finance bill, and it looks like the government is really trying to meet with the people at the middle. What is the way forward? What do you think about these issues happening in Kenya? What is really happening?
First of all, let me say it is in the interest of President Ruto to resolve that problem as fast as possible. And the reason is simple. What started as a genuine protest could easily be hijacked by other forces. There are so many interest groups that are interested in using a crowd, and they can make use of that crowd for their own agenda that may even be totally at variance with what started the problem, which was the Finance Act 2024. Now, a Finance Act that seemed to have, targeted certain parts of the economy where the impact will be felt by a lot of people at the lower end of the ladder is going to be a challenge. Don't forget that globally there has been this cost of living crisis that has been going on for a while. Of course, the developed markets are getting out of it, but a lot of other markets like ours, African market, are not quite out of that cost of living. If not even, in fact, it's getting worse in some part of Africa. So when you take a tax that will affect bread, that will affect cooking oil, you are actually looking for trouble. That is what has happened in Kenya, and hopefully it's a lesson for other parts of Africa who might be considering similar measures at this time.
Okay, let us take a look at what is really happening. What are the core reasons behind the Kenyan youth? The finance bill, yes. How do we see the economic challenges faced by Kenya compared to that in Nigeria? Because it looks like Nigeria might be the next hotbed. Looking at the macroeconomic index of the Nigerian economy, from inflation to our foreign reserve to our empty excess crude account. As a matter of fact, despite the fact that the price of oil, the global price of oil, is above our oil benchmark for the 2024 appropriation bill. And also taking a look at what has been happening regarding inflation, which is the common devil affecting the entire Nigerian economy. Do you see what is happening in Kenya happening in Nigeria anytime soon?
It's difficult to say. It depends on how the Nigerian authorities approach what I will call the silence of the graveyard, which may be more what we have right now. There are nobody is hitting the streets and all that stuff, but I am aware that there is a very serious cost of living crisis going on in the country, and there's a way what is going on in one country will incite a similar response in other parts of similar countries as well. The problem is similar. The countries themselves are also similar in certain ways. So the message for the Nigerian government is to say, look, these things that are affecting people, especially the masses, require certain attention. And if I were in government today, or if I were in a position to advise, I would say deal with that food crisis, food cost problem. It is a major, major problem. I'm not saying it is plain vanilla, it's something you can just snap your finger and solve, but let us sit down. They say we are 200 million people. We can find some real great minds that can sit in a room and knock together a solution that we can deploy and deploy in good time to save the situation. The food crisis is real, and it could boomerang, it could go into a next phase that we may not like if we're not deliberate about the actions we take to resolve it. The interesting thing is that if we resolve the food problem, we will also be resolving many problems. If you resolve the food problem, it means that people will now have more disposable income to themselves. When they have more disposable income, they can consume other items. We've seen situations in which some businesses are not doing very well, but some businesses are leaving and all of that. Consumption requires disposable income. But food is the number one problem I would like to solve from my income. If that food is already taking 70-80% of my income, then where is the money to consume other products? So these are the realities why we must solve the food problem, and solving the food problem will help to solve some other problem, including even the ballooning inflation problem that we have.
So you're saying that the ballooning inflation problem is as a result of food inflation, really affecting every part of the Nigerian economy.
Exactly. It's a huge part of it. Just take the plot, the inflation curve of Nigeria, and you will see the food inflation is way ahead of the headline inflation itself. So while you have headline inflation still in 30 something, food inflation has crossed the 40% mark. So anything you do in that space is going to be significant, and you will feel the effect in the economy progressively.
Okay, so taking a look at what has happened in Kenya, from taxes on bread, taxes on a couple of other things like cooking oil. They also have what we call the eco levy, which is more or less like placing a levy on some of the goods that have been brought into the country that are not eco-friendly, and is really taking a toll on the price of diapers, on the price of sanitary pads, which the ladies and the girls make use of. And really, it's one of the major fundamental issues for the protest as well. And it has become so political. It's putting the country in a state of turmoil. Now, bringing it back home, looking at the cybersecurity levy that was initially put into the Nigerian economy at first, when Nigerians had to say that, hey, we're not taking this cybersecurity levy. Also, everything is just coming in one fell swoop. Because if you look at what has happened regarding the fuel subsidy removal, look at what has happened regarding the increase in power, in the price, in our power tariff, electricity tariff hike, a couple of other things. Do you think that this is the right time for us to be having that, despite the fact that we're having headline inflation at 3.995%, food inflation at this particular rate? FX, we've never had FX this bad. Currently at the 1,500 naira level. So it is so tough. Do you think this is the right time for all of this, or we're heading towards doom?
I think the government of Nigeria has also been more, I would say, responsive in certain areas of policies. For example, they saw the way Nigerians reacted to the cybersecurity levy. What did they do? They withdrew it. I also remember that even the Finance Act 2023 was suspended. At some point, there were certain taxes and all the rest that were in that particular act, and the government, people, manufacturers, everybody protested, and that act was suspended at some point. So those kind of responses might help, at least in the short term, um, but it needs to go further, and the going further will require that we take specific action in some of those other areas where we are not able to help right now. Major one is the food area. Yeah, that we must see. There's also something generally about emerging economies, or maybe let's say African economies as a whole. We're not tax based. African economies are largely natural resource. The income of the government is largely from natural resources. So transiting from an economy that is used to getting money from natural resources to the one that will want to bring money from taxes, that transition is not always an easy thing, and it also has to be properly timed. If it is not properly timed, it will boomerang. So the advantage of being able to get taxes is that it is believed that it calls for more accountability. When people pay taxes, they are more concerned about how their taxes are used than when it is oil. I have no connection with oil. I've never even been to. I mean, that would be the idea of some people. I've never even been to where oil is being mined anyway. So whatever they like, they can do. When people pay taxes, they are more concerned and they demand for more accountability for their money. But transiting from natural resources to taxes has to be properly timed, and it's a work, it's a project that requires all sort of sensitivities and planning to be able to do it. I don't think that the middle of a cost of living crisis is ideal for some of those tax raising policies. That's my take on that.
But I've never seen a country that really has taxed its way to prosperity. There is no country in the world that has taxed its way to prosperity. And a lot of stakeholders like you, economists like you, have also suggested that the government should be looking at tax reliefs for a couple of essential sectors, like the food sector. There should be no, we shouldn't have levies on food being imported into the country because of the current food insecurity that we're experiencing. Look at what food inflation is at this point in time. Look at the price of tomato, the price of rice, beans, and staple foods. Do you also come from that school of thought that tax relief should be given to some sectors? Also, incentives should be given to, let's say, the manufacturing sector, and also funding. Because one of my stories this morning actually talked about only 7% of farming communities have access to fundings in the Nigerian banks. Only 7%, meaning that 93% of farming communities do not have access to credit. And an economy or a sector without access to credit is doomed for failure. And if you look at all of that, it tells us what is really happening regarding food inflation and access to credit and some other incentives. What is your school of thought regarding all of that?
You see, the issue of access to finance is a delicate one. Over the past decade, a whole lot of money has been made available to the agriculture sector. A lot of it. The Uncle Borrower Scheme and some other schemes of government involve hundreds upon hundreds of billions disbursed, supposedly for agriculture. Now, agriculture is a fairly risky business. I remember several years ago when I was still in banking, I had gone to make a presentation on agriculture to some World Bank experts. And we were talking about this issue of financing. And the question the guy asked me is that if you give me money at a concessionary rate, if you give me money at 9%, and I can turn around and use that same money to buy treasury. Let's use contemporary today, and I can turn around and use that money to buy treasury bill at 20%. Why will I farm? Am I crazy? Why will I do a risky business if I can game the system, get money at cheap rate, and turn around to the other side and use the money for a profitable return without doing anything? I will not farm because farming is risky.
So are you suggesting that
over the past 10 years are hanging as we speak? They never came back.
So are you suggesting that our fixed income securities should be less attractive?
No, well, as it is for now, because we're trying to use monetary policy
Yes.
to drive down inflation, that is what we are seeing with the money market rate of today. But in the real sense, it will not be enough to achieve what we want to achieve in good time. We need fiscal policies to support that monetary policy to be able to achieve what we're achieving. So I understand why it is that high. I'm just saying that, you see, we tend to think that money, throwing money at something solves the problem. But a lot of time, if we don't dig into the fundamentals and address it in such a way that will not allow people to game the system, what will happen is that we will throw money at the problem. The money will be taken into the system, they will not come out, and the problem will still remain. We've seen that in several sectors, not even just agriculture. We've seen it even in aviation. There has been intervention in aviation, intervention in this, intervention in that. The question is, so what was the result of those interventions? So we have to be careful even about intervention. But I hear you loud and clear. Agric needs intervention. It is how we structure the intervention to prevent people from gaming the system that will be part of it. And it's not just financing that is the issue. There are other problems. There are issues of yield. Of course, some people will say tied out to financing. Why is it that our own products are not yielding what they are yielding in Egypt or in South Africa or even in Kenya? So farming practices, issues, access to fertilizers, access to modern practices, modern farming practices, all those things are all encompassing. The access road from centers of production to centers of consumption is an issue. The transportation cost by virtue of the energy cost has also become an additional issue. Then there are other factors like insecurity, which are also in that space. So it is not plain vanilla, but like I said, if we sit ourselves down in a room, we have enough people, smart people who can knock this together and come up with a solution that can work for us. If it has been done in other places, why can it not be done in Nigeria? The issue of we're importing food is something that should cause a concern for us. In the short term, yes, we can import food to alleviate the problem, but we must be asking ourselves what all these arable lands are doing that we are importing food. We can feed West Africa. So why are we importing food? We must ask that question.
Do you think that we have the capacity to feed the entire West Africa, like you said?
We can feed West Africa comfortably. The land is there, massive. We don't have water poverty. We have water everywhere. We need commercial farms. And we need to be able to find structures that will deliver those commercial farms. It's just about 2%, because I always laugh when I hear people say all of us should go to the farm. All of us going to the farm is not the solution to food crisis. We don't need everybody becoming farmers. Only about 2% of Americans are farmers, and they overproduce, they export, they can feed so many other nations by 2%. So we need to ask the real questions. How are people doing this farming successfully in all those jurisdictions that have been successful with farming? We have the land, we have the water, we have the people. Why can't we farm successfully? So all those factors that are impeding our success in that space, we need to find a way to deal with them.
Mr.
Rather
Bonaro,
than
on the final note, I would love to just ask you, do you see what is happening in Kenya happening in Nigeria soon with her current macroeconomic matters, food inflation 40%, headline at 3.95%, looking at what is happening with our foreign exchange markets, looking at what is happening with our foreign reserve, looking at what is happening with our excess crude account? Do you see what is happening in Kenya happening now? Remember, we also have minimum wage debacle. We also have the fuel subsidy removal. There are lots and lots of issues. Electricity tariff also, the hike is there. And there are lots of other stories that are mulling really around the corners, especially the ones that has to do with the economy. Do you see what is happening in Kenya happening in Nigeria anytime soon?
I think it is avoidable in Nigeria. Number one, because there are lessons from what is going on in Kenya now, which Nigerians could cut over and use it to ensure that similar thing will not happen in Nigeria. Number two, if we address just one factor, I mean, you have listed like 10 things, but if we address one, the effects on all the other factors will be so significant that we won't get to all those Kenya arena at
Which
all.
one of
And
them do
that
you?
one factor is food.
Okay, you said the most important to you is food.
It's food. Solve that food problem. It will drive down inflation. It will release more disposable income into the pockets of people, and they can consume more. It will just generally douse the tension that we have right now in this country.
Mr. Bolahan Olajede, the financial analyst in Nigeria. You've heard from him. I want to say thank you very much for coming into the business hour. Been an amazing time having a great conversation with you regarding the Kenyan protest and in drawing a comparison between what is happening in Kenya and the macroeconomic index we have in this country. I want to say a very, very big thank you to you. Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank
you've
you
heard
very much.
from Mr. Bolahan Olajede. When we come back, we're going to be addressing all other issues, especially taking your opinions on social media regarding the Nigerian economy and the global economy at large. We'll also be taking a look at what is happening with the market. Ladies and gentlemen, when we come back, we're going to be addressing all these issues. This is the Business Hour.